Hello, today I'm going to talk about my top 10 Velvet Underground albums. First thing I'm going to say is I think the Velvet Underground is maybe my favorite band of all time. It's hard to choose, but they're definitely in the top 10. I never get sick of them, and I would probably say they're the most influential band of all time, maybe besides the Beatles. But for punk, garage rock, art rock, it all stems from them. So there are three kind of formations of the band. The core element, I think, is Lou Reed, John Cale, Sterling Morrison, and Maureen Tucker. Then you could add Nico as this odd element out. And then in later years, it was Lou Reed, Doug Yule, Sterling Morrison, and Maureen Tucker. There are others that played with them, but those are the main players. Doug Yule replaced John Cale in late 1968. There were a lot of ego issues between Lou Reed and John Cale, but I think that's part of where the magic came from, but he was kind of kicked out. I'm a big John Cale fan as well. I will do some of his albums at some point. There are a lot of collections and box sets like the Quine and Matrix tapes. I'm not going to include those, and I'm not going to include the album Squeeze because that was only Velvet Underground in name, I think. At number 10, we have Live 1993. From the year 1993, the label is Sire Records. So this was a reunion double album recorded live during their brief 1993 European tour. It features Lou Reed, John Cale, Sterling Morrison, and Maureen Tucker, the core band I was talking about. And it's the first time all four played together since 1968. There's also a DVD of the live show. It is criticized for lacking the raw edge of their original performances. It is kind of more of a nostalgia trip than a resurrection. But I graduated high school in 1991, and during high school, the Velvet Underground were my obsession. A few friends of mine and I would listen to it in the basement of my cousin's house and just over and over again and just talk about it. And the band was just this mystery to us that it could even exist. Most of the albums I have were on cassette tape at that time. In this, the Nico songs were sang by John Cale because she died in 1988 from a cerebral hemorrhage following a bicycling accident. I think this is solid overall, but it's a little bit of a letdown. I think people were expecting more from this reunion, and it's a shame they never got into the studio. I'd be interested to see what they would have done, but again, the egos got in the way and it was very short-lived. Number 9, we have Live at Max's Kansas City from 1972, but recorded in 1970 on Cotillion Records. It was recorded on a mono cassette recorder by fan Bridget Polk, who was one of the members of the Factory, and it was on Lou Reed's last night with the band. It is lo-fi, kind of gritty. It was a reissue. Rhino Records released a 2 CD deluxe edition, including both full sets in their original running order. I would prefer that edition, actually. I think this is technically shoddy, but culturally vital. And there's a mystery in the shoddiness of the recording, I think. It's a raw snapshot of the dying embers of the original VU, and it's got this kind of melancholy to it. At number 8, we have Another View from 1986, released on Verve Records. This is the companion to the other outtake and unreleased material album called VU. I think the highlights here are Hey Mr. Rain and Ride Into the Sun. These are deep cuts for completionists. The collection here is slighter than the VU album, but still valuable for understanding the band's transitional sound with John Cale and without John Cale. At number 7, we have 1969, The Velvet Underground Live. Released in 1974, but recorded in 1969 on Mercury Records. This is a double LP of live material recorded in Texas and San Francisco. It is a much better recording than the Max's Kansas City album. It is Doug Yule era Velvet Underground, with Reed in strong form, kind of warm, stripped down takes on key songs. It is probably their best live document, even if the lineup isn't the classic one. But I would say this focuses more on their rockier songs. I think with Cale, they were a maelstrom, but with Yule, they were a rock band, if that makes any sense. At number 6, we have VU, year 1985, released on Verve Records. This is a compilation of unreleased tracks from 1968 and 1969, shelved when the band left MGM. The highlights include Stephanie Says, I Can't Stand It, and Lisa Says. It's surprising surprisingly polished and shows what another studio album might have looked like from them. I think this is the better of the two outtake albums. I adore the John Cale track Temptation Inside Your Heart. It is very playful and definitely prime Velvet Underground. One of their greatest songs that I wish was on an actual album is The Ocean. Every version of The Ocean I just love. At number 5, we have The Velvet Underground, year 1969, label MGM. First post-John Cale album, softer, more introspective than their earlier work. It includes the classic Pale Blue Eyes, which has been covered numerous times, and Candy Says. It's the emotional core of the band's catalog, I think. It was critically ignored at the time, later hailed as quietly revolutionary. It sounds like it was recorded in a closet, almost like they didn't want other people to hear or overhear it. It makes it very intimate or kind of secret feeling, like they're letting you in on a secret. There are many classics here. I think my favorite track on it is I'm Set Free. This is one of Lou Reed's most underrated tracks, I feel like. There are a lot of rockers on this album, and they sound better on the live albums because they have more life. Like Beginning to See the Light and other songs I think just sound better live. At number 4, we have Loaded. The year is 1970 and the label is Cotillion Atlantic. It's the last official VU studio album, though Lou Reed quit before final mixing. Aimed to be loaded with hits, it includes Sweet Jane and Rock and Roll, probably their two most famous songs. Just the inclusion of these two tracks makes this a classic, but there are many other great songs on here. This is Doug Yule heavy, and some versions tamper with Reed's original vision. One standout, I think, is the song New Age. That song just, I don't know, there's something about it. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Kinks. In the mid-70s, the Kinks went into this kind of introspective, a little bit softer vibe that they didn't really do in their early career, which was more rockin'. The song New Age kind of reminds me of that, a little bit like Celluloid Heroes, if you know that song. The 2015 remaster of this album has a few bonus tracks, and the version of The Ocean on this is the best version. That is just an excellent version. At number 3, we have Chelsea Girl from Nico, year 1967, label Verve. So this is Nico's debut solo album. Why am I putting it on a list of Velvet Underground albums? This is heavily influenced and substantially written by the Velvet Underground, or VU members. Lou Reed, John Cale, and Sterling Morrison wrote or performed on multiple tracks. I mean, it's kind of like a Velvet Underground album. Nico hated the string and flute overdubs, but it's become a cult classic, fragile, morbid, and essential. Songs from this are on many soundtracks, including the Royal Tenenbaums. Besides the Velvet Underground songwriting credits, 3 tracks were written by Jackson Browne and 1 by Bob Dylan. Some people don't like the wind instruments and strings, but I actually kind of like it. It gives this kind of wintry or kind of fall vibe. It's classic, kind of baroque, beautiful, tragic sounding. I mean, Nico's voice is just tragic sounding, I think. You could tell that the studio was kind of pushing for her to be a pop artist, but she didn't want to be that. So after this album, she went much darker. John Cale became her producer, and she released 3 great dark Nico albums that are just quintessential Nico. I will probably do videos on some of them at some point. But yeah, I think this is a classic and it kind of belongs with the Velvet Underground work, I think. At number 2, we have White Light, White Heat. The year is 1968. The label is Verve. This is the band's noisiest, most confrontational album, and it's Cale's last with the group. It is pure chaos. Nico was gone at this point. It includes Sister Ray, a 17-minute noise jam that is either genius or some kind of punishment. They blew off the commercial world completely here. This is proto-punk before punk knew it existed. You can see where the Stooges got a lot of their stuff from, and the MC5. All that's kind of around this time. Some essential tracks: Lady Godiva's Operation, excellent song. The Gift, you know, good on the first listen or two, but gets a little bit redundant after a while. But I think this album was way ahead of its time, like way ahead, too ahead of its time. Whenever I talk about a movie director or a novelist getting darker, crazier, pushing the envelope to the edge, I always say it's their white light, white heat, because that's basically what they do here. At number 1, we have the Velvet Underground and Nico from 1967. The label is Verve. I'm sure this is not a surprise to anyone that is a Velvet Underground fan. This was produced by Andy Warhol and Tom Wilson, although I think Andy Warhol was more of just a ringleader than a producer. Nico is featured on several tracks. Nico joining the Velvet Underground was Andy Warhol's idea. The band members were actually kind of resistant to it, but it does work because it's kind of Beauty and the Beast. This bombed commercially, which I think is music sacrilege. It was later recognized as one of the most influential albums ever made. It explores heroin, BDSM, alienation, all wrapped in pop art and droning chaos. John Cale was in the experimental music scene before this, and you can see how that influence was brought in here. This defined underground rock and punk, period. Nobody else. This is the album that stemmed everything. People like Brian Eno and David Bowie and how it influenced them. It's the perfect balance between death, beauty, eroticism. It's like the philosopher Georges Bataille translated into music. Every track is gold, but my personal favorites are Venus in Furs. It's just mesmerizing. I love the viola. It's rock, but it channels these international flavors. All Tomorrow's Parties, another great song. Probably Nico's best song with Velvet Underground, I think. And also I'll Be Your Mirror, which is another great Nico song. The classic cover was designed by Andy Warhol. There are different editions and box sets of it. I recommend them all. I will put links below to these albums. You can check them out, but that's all I got. If you have anything to say, if you think I put these in the wrong order, you can comment below. Or if there's one you especially like, you can also talk about that. But that's all I got. Take care. Have a good day.